Google, Twitter, Meta, Amazon, all of the big tech companies seem to be going through mass layoffs right now, to the tune of tens of thousands of employees. Mark Zuckerberg, my old boss, was in the news last week saying he doesn't like managers who manage managers, which could mean that there are more layoffs on the way from Meta as well. We could be seeing a round two. Why are these tech companies actually going through these mass layoffs? And why do I think this is going to have a huge impact on the broader business world? All that and more analysed in this video. Let's go. I'm Amar Iqbal from 5 Ways to Innovate. On this channel, I share insights and stories from my 20 plus years leading innovation at some of the world's top companies, including Facebook and Deloitte Digital. So if you've been following the news at all, you've heard about these massive tech layoffs going on, lots of headlines everywhere. Now, the popular narrative has been, well, we're hitting an economic downturn, revenue is down, and this is why we're going through these layoffs. Obviously, that is one of the reasons that this is happening. But, if we look at the numbers a little bit, I would say there are some other things at play here. So let's take my old company, Meta, for example, a company that makes about $120 billion a year, laid off 11,000 people. What does that actually mean in terms of dollars and cents? Well, conservatively, we're talking a few $billions here. And I know I'm throwing that around flippantly. A few $1 billion is a lot of money. But if you really look at the large scale of these numbers, those billions start to pale in comparison. And surely there are other ways that you can make back those billions. Take Apple and Tim Cook, for example. Tim Cook has voluntarily just taken a 40% pay cut so that they don't need to do any layoffs. Now, I'm not suggesting that every other tech CEO needs to follow suit and take a similar pay cut in order to make the numbers work. But surely you could figure out ways across an executive board, people who are getting paid a lot, you could reduce that and you could find the money somewhere else. So if it's not just the money, why are these companies actually going through with the layoffs? Well, a couple of other theories have been thrown around. Some people say, it's just an excuse, economic downturn, they're fine on the money front, they're just using this opportunity to trim the fat. Well, I would beg to differ. I think these companies have had a really great track record of hiring the best talent on the planet. I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the smartest people in the world at these tech companies. And I can tell you, any company worth its salt wouldn't be making all of these short-term cuts just to make a couple of quarterly numbers work. Interestingly, Google went through some layoffs way back in 2008 during the financial crisis. And what was their biggest learning from that? Hey, that could have been a time where we reinvested and held on to all of that great talent. That's their great regret as a company. So I find it highly doubtful that such a smart company, having gone through and learned that lesson in recent history, would repeat the same mistake again. So now let's have a think about, where are these companies at the moment? Meta, Google, these type of companies, they have had unconstrained growth since inception. Now what we're seeing for the very first time in history is that these companies are having to deal with not just a slowdown, but in some cases actually a shrinkage in those revenue numbers. They've never had to face an existential crisis like this in their entire history. These tech companies are having to deal with the economic realities that most other companies have had to deal with for decades and centuries before them. So really, as always, I would say follow the money. Probably the number one reason that these companies are using this opportunity now to make layoffs is to keep shareholders happy and to keep the share price up. When layoffs happen, they get announced in the media, and then the share price starts to rebound slightly. We've seen this happen over the last 6 months and will continue to happen. This is signaling to the market to say, hey, in times of downturn, we are economically responsible. We are grown-ups. We know how to manage a company. And yes, we know when we need to make cuts, as well as when we need to grow, we can deal with these realities. That's the signal being sent to the market in order to keep that share price sustained and growing through this difficult period. Okay, so you'll notice I made a pretty bold claim there. Something has just happened to these companies that has literally never happened in their short history before. And unfortunately, in order to unpack that, I'm going to have to do the unthinkable and talk about something that everybody seems to be talking about right now. Let's talk ChatGPT. So I saw this great little snippet of a talk given by Nicholas Thompson, CEO of The Atlantic, where he's talking about ChatGPT. And he poses a great question.
Why did ChatGPT? Why did that come from OpenAI, from a small company with a couple of hundred people working on it? Why didn't it come from one of the giant companies? Why didn't it come from Google, which has many of the top AI engineers in the world, has all the data you could possibly want?
And herein lies the real insight of this story. Companies like Google have been working on AI for decades. In fact, we've seen speeches by many senior executives, even the CEO, talking about Lambda. We saw some news articles the other day about them releasing a music AI that can literally use a text prompt to generate realistic sounding music. There is absolutely no doubt that companies like Google have been sitting on and working on AI technology at least as good, if not better, than ChatGPT and DALL-E and some of these other OpenAI projects for quite some time. So if they've had all this great tech in their back pocket for a while, why haven't they released it to the public? Well, if you ask anyone at Google, they'll probably tell you that they've been sitting on this technology for about 3 years, making sure that it's more accurate, it filters out hate speech, it's more compliant with regulations, and generally is not going to get them in legal hot water in any way. Now, contrast that with a scrappy startup like OpenAI. It's been pretty well documented that ChatGPT, sometimes despite its best efforts, will come back with some pretty fake information. It might be bordering on plagiarism or have some other problems that a company like Google would never want to go near with a 10-foot pole. And if you think about it for a second, we've grown to trust these services like Google. Just 2 nights ago, my little kid had a fever and he slept in our bed. Now, he was breathing really fast and his heart rate was elevated. What did I do? I went to Google. I searched for, is it normal for an 18-month-old baby to be breathing so fast to have elevated heart rate during a fever? Google came up with an answer. I took it at face value, and there you go. I literally put my child's life in the hands of these answers that Google is giving me. That's how much we've come to trust these services. And in a way, they've kind of backed themselves into a corner. That's a trust that they can't afford to break. They've become a necessary utility in our day-to-day lives. Think about it realistically. Do you want your electricity company walking around saying, hey, we move fast and break things? No, you want them to move fast and have stable infrastructure. This is why these companies go through these shifts over time. Now, I can almost hear all of you innovation experts holding up your copies of Clayton Christensen as I'm saying this. Here's the big penny drop for me. We are literally seeing the innovator's dilemma playing out right here, right now in 2023. Let's take everybody's favorite example of Kodak. Kodak invented digital photography, but chose not to commercialize this technology because they didn't want to cannibalize their film business. Well, you could make an argument that's exactly what Google is doing right now, right? They've created all of this great AI technology. They've held it back because they need it to be safe. In the meantime, smaller, more disruptive players have come through, and Google is left sitting there holding the baby. Except, in this case, it is slightly different. It's not Google saying, hey, we don't want to disrupt our search business, that's why we're not going to play with it. In fact, they have entire teams working on products that could blow up their own search business overnight. Google isn't afraid of disrupting themselves. The thing is, how do you do it without breaking the internet? What we are seeing right now play out is a changing of the guard. The FANG companies who were the disruptors have now become the incumbents, and no doubt we're about to see a rash of smaller, more disruptive players coming in and eating their lunch. That is the real wave of change that these large tech companies are going to have to figure out a way of riding. This is a big moment in history. For the first time ever, these large tech companies are facing not just a slowdown, but an actual shrinkage, leading to layoffs and leading them to a situation where they now need to play defense against the disruptors who are springing up of today. And make no mistake, this isn't a looming threat that's coming tomorrow. Microsoft investing so heavily into OpenAI is a very clear signal that this is a burning platform that's here and now. As an innovation analyst who no longer works for these tech companies, I can honestly say this is a really exciting time. I'm excited to see not only what the large tech companies are going to do to defend their core business now that they are the grown-ups, they are the incumbents. But I'm also excited to see something else. With all of these mass layoffs, we literally now have about 100,000 of the world's most talented people on the open market. At the same time, the market is openly saying, hey, AI is the new future. Combine these two things, I would be absolutely shocked if we don't see a whole rash of new, very disruptive startups coming out of this wave. If I were a VC and I'd learned any lessons over the last 30 years, this is exactly where I'd be putting all of my attention right now. Because if there's one thing that's sure to come out of these tech layoffs, in a dorm room or a garage somewhere on this planet, The next Facebook, the next Google, or maybe the next ChatGPT is being invented right now. Personally, I'll be keeping a close eye on this space, and I think you should too. Thank you so much for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to support the channel, please be sure to like and subscribe. If you like our content, check out our other videos and visit us at 5waystoinnovate.com to find out more about our mission to help 1,000 corporates reinvent themselves in order to build the business of tomorrow. I'm Amr Iqbal. Stay tuned and I'll see you soon.